Hey, what's up guys? Alex here with a new video, and today we're going to be doing a fun comparison between the new Leica 50mm f2 Summicron-SL and the Panasonic 50mm f1.8S. You might be wondering, Alex, why are you comparing a $350 lens to a $1,900 lens? Let's answer that question first before we get started on this comparison. And I'll try to do it fairly quick because a lot of the viewers here might already know why. But essentially, Panasonic and Leica have been working together for the last 5 years, I want to say, when they formed the L-mount alliance with Sigma. Essentially, Sigma and Panasonic agreed to use Leica's L-mount for their lenses and cameras. Last year, Panasonic and Leica announced an extended partnership where they would share even more technology about their cameras and lenses, and we're finally seeing the fruits of that partnership. Leica last month announced 2 new lenses, a Leica 35 and 50 Summicron-SL, as part of their new budget line of lenses. Yes, budget with quotation marks, because a $2,000 lens is definitely not a budget lens for any camera brand, but in the Leica world, this is a big budget lens because the next 50mm in the lineup, the 50 Apo, retails for, I believe, $5,195 or $5,500, so essentially this is half the cost. With, obviously, this being a budget lens and these two lenses looking identical when you look at their design and optical elements, the question has to be answered. Are they the same lens? Is there any significant differences? And is it worth spending an additional $1,500 to upgrade to the Leica version? I want to answer all those questions today, so let's get this video started. And we're going to start off with the obvious: build quality. Now, these lenses have the same dimensions, but they feel night and day different. I'll start off with the Panasonic. So the Panasonic lens is an all plastic construction. It is weather sealed and it has an autofocus manual focus switch, and it is extremely light. I will say this, it feels extremely cheap. Can't fault it. It's $350 on sale right now. So for that price point, I can't really fault the feeling of the lens. In comparison, the Leica, also a fully weather sealed design, this time with no switches and essentially using Leica's design philosophy where it's simple, clean, and looks great, also feels great in the hand. The all-metal construction adds a little bit more weight to this lens, but it's still not a heavy lens, so it feels solid and overall balances very well with the Leica SL2S. I'm a huge fan of the size and feel of this lens, and it's crazy how different they feel. Now you might be thinking, Alex, you're biased, you're obviously into Leica. Let me share this quick story with you. My wife clearly has no bias. As a matter of fact, if she had a bias, it'd probably be on the cheaper stuff, so I wouldn't spend so much money. But I handed her the Panasonic lens the other day, and she asked me why this lens felt so cheap. Obviously, she has no skin in the game, and that just goes to tell you that all plastic construction is always going to feel a little inferior to a all metal, heftier design. So from a build quality perspective, you can definitely tell there's a difference. What about autofocus? In my first impressions video, I talked about how the Leica performs so fast and snappy. It actually gives the SL2S new life. It feels like a different camera. It focuses so quick. It focuses quick even in low light, and I was very impressed. The Panasonic is snappy, it is fast, but the Leica does feel a hair faster. And the Panasonic did give me a few quirks a handful of times. Now, this didn't happen often, but it happened to me a handful of times where when I was trying to focus on something, the camera would do a quick pulse before acquiring focus. It didn't necessarily take forever, but it was a little jarring when you're looking through the viewfinder. All of a sudden you see just pulse, and then it acquires focus. It happened a handful of times, didn't happen consistently, but I have not seen that kind of behavior on the Leica lens. Again, something extremely small, and would I say is a deal breaker? Absolutely not, but doesn't happen on the Leica, it did happen on the Panasonic. So, small differences there. What about image quality? This is the question of the day, because as it stands right now, there is a $1,550 difference between these two lenses. Now keep in mind, as I'm filming this video, the Panasonic is on sale for $350. So that's a substantial difference. Is there a difference in image quality? I'm going to bust out my laptop. We're going to compare some images and answer that question. But before that, I do have to point out the Panasonic lens is assembled in China and the Leica lens is assembled in Portugal by Leica, which means, and I'm going to allude to something here, even if they have the same optical formula, same optical elements, if the Leica factory has better tolerances or higher tolerances for their build quality, you might be getting a slightly better lens because of those reasons. Where if this lens is manufactured in a factory where they have a larger room for error, don't necessarily mind a few things here and there is going to be some of your differences. But enough talking, let's go ahead and bust out the laptop and pixel peep some images. Okay, I have Lightroom pulled up. I will point out when these images are edited or they're raw files, and I will also tell you why there might be some differences in composition. But let's go ahead and dive right in. So this first set of images, as you can see, the Leica's on the left, Panasonic's on the right. I did use a tripod for these images. Unfortunately, I used the Peak Design tripod, which is a phenomenal tripod, but when you change lenses, the actual mount does flex a little up and down, so the composition isn't perfect, and you'll see a little difference here with the sun flare, and it's because of that. But when looking at the images, you can see that they look identical. If you were to zoom in and look at the actual center sharpness, they both look the same. Let me actually go ahead and get a little closer here to at least 100% so we can find any differences. And here at 100%, they look the same. Now you can see a little bit of lens flare on the right-hand side with a Panasonic. Again, the camera did shift when I changed lenses. If you look to the right-hand corner, you're gonna see the Leica has a lens flare on the corner where the Panasonic doesn't, and it's because of that shift. But as far as image quality goes, they look the same. Because this is a comparison for YouTubers, I do have to point out this difference. This difference does not impact, I would say, most client work unless you're a landscape photographer. I did mention if you look at the center sharpness, they both look the same color rendition, same bokeh. But I did notice, I hate myself for doing this, but I have to point it out. I did notice here on the left-hand side, you can see how the Panasonic starts losing some sharpness on the corner here in the left-hand side versus the Leica maintains its sharpness across the entire image. Again, you can see how sharp the rocks are here on the left-hand side, and on the Panasonic, you start seeing a slight blur because the corner isn't as sharp. We're gonna see a little bit more of that in other images, but I started noticing it here. Again, when you look at it from just a regular distance, they look the same. Let's move on to another image. Again, this is another image where the tripod did shift a little, which means we're gonna have a different flare. You can see here on the Panasonic, there is a flare going across her body. On the Leica, you do have a bigger flare in the right-hand corner here on the right side. This is because the tripod shifted and the sun was back there. Other than that, the images look the same. Zooming in as far as sharpness, they look identical. Let's go ahead and move on to another set of images. Now for this set of images, we have the Leica on the left, Panasonic on the right. Both of these are edited with my preset. Looking at them and zooming in, both images look the exact same. Looking at the corners on this image, I didn't really notice that much of a difference. Again, it's gonna apply differently to the different set of images. It might be slightly sharper here on the Leica on the left-hand side than the Panasonic, but nothing crazy on this image. I should also say all the images you're gonna see are shot wide open, because if you buy an f2 lens, you're buying it to shoot it at f2. So let's look at a few more images. These images here were shot handheld, no tripod. I tried to match the exact framing, so it's gonna be slight variation. Not a most interesting image here, but I did want to compare chromatic aberrations and purple fringing. We have the Leica on the left, Panasonic on the right. If you zoom in, you're going to see that both lenses display the exact same purple fringing here inside the number 6. Looking at the background blur and bokeh, they both look the same. In this image, again, there is absolutely no major differences between the lenses, and it's very safe to assume that they are definitely using the same optical formula, and all the differences we're going to see is going to come down to the assembly process, the manufacturing process, and the actual tolerances they have for these lenses. I'm going to go ahead and show you one more set of images, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up my thoughts. In this set of images here, we have the Leica on the left, Panasonic on the right. Again, both are handheld. Both these images are edited with my preset, same settings across the board, copy and paste. Zooming in, center sharpness is identical. Again, if you go to the right-hand extreme corner of the image, you're gonna see that here on the Leica, and I'm not even sure you can see this on YouTube, so I'm actually gonna provide all these images for you to download and play with yourself. You're gonna see the Leica, this tree here on the corner is actually sharper and has more detail than the Panasonic. The Panasonic starts getting a little blurry and losing detail here on the right-hand side. If we also look at the left-hand side, we're gonna notice the exact same thing. The Leica is sharper and has more detail in the corners. Like I mentioned, I'm gonna include all these images plus more for you to play with and compare yourself. But just to keep this video short and sweet, I think we've shared enough to draw our conclusions. So let's go over my final thoughts. Are these lenses the same? I would say so. I would say that the difference in the corners probably comes down to the assembly process and the different tolerances that each company has during the manufacturing. Obviously, when you're manufacturing a $350 lens, you might have more leniency on, again, imperfections. You might have more copy variation between lenses versus when you're manufacturing a $2,000 lens. I'm rounding up a little bit. You're gonna want it to be exactly the same for all copies, so you have less copy variation and you really shoot for perfection. So then you have to ask yourself, is the Leica version worth the additional $1,550? And that's a question I cannot answer for you. I actually thought about this like long and hard this weekend, and I think I have the perfect analogy. Today, you can go buy a Honda Civic, base model with cloth seats, really no bells and whistles for a certain price point. And if you want, you can pay an additional amount of money to get the leather seats, the nicer feeling steering wheel, the nicer amenities. And nobody would fault you for getting that nicer Honda Civic. On the flip side, you can also buy an Acura, which uses the exact same motor, chassis as a Honda Civic, pay even more for, again, nicer quality materials. In all these examples, these cars share the exact same engines and all get you from point A to point B the exact same way. What Leica's doing here is offering you that premium option, which means if you want the nicer feeling lens, you want the nicer feeling experience, you want that slightly better autofocus performance, you want the perfect corners, you have the option to pay for it. It's $1,550 in this case. But can we fault someone for wanting the nicer experience and wanting the nicer lens? Absolutely not. So I actually really like the fact that consumers have options, because as it stands, we have companies like Canon eliminating third-party options from their cameras and limiting the options for us consumers. So the fact that with the L-mount Alliance, you have the option to buy a cheap plastic 50mm f1.8, a plastic fantastic for the lineup, or if you want to splurge, you want a nicer experience, you want an all-metal body, you want better AF and perfect corners, you can pay for it. You can pay for that experience and have that option. That is great for the consumer. So I can't answer the question if it's worth it, because that is a question for yourself. Like I do with all my videos, guys, and I've mentioned it multiple times, I'm including these images for you to play with yourself so you can make those conclusions. As always, if you have any questions, thoughts, comments, please leave them down below. Love to have a conversation. Also dropping my Instagram, so if you want to DM me, we can do that there. But guys, as always, please like this video, please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one, guys. Peace.